Hey there, Fletcher from All Things Overlanding here, and today I just wanted to do a quick walk around of my Xtrusion Overland Bedrack. I get a lot of questions about this thing. I'm actually waiting on a couple pieces for this thing, and then I'll do another sort of full review of it. But I'll tell you what I'm supposed to be getting, and then I will also show you all the stuff that I've got on this thing. I've gone quite a ways with sort of modifying it and utilizing the unique channel system that it's got. And I swear that this is probably, in my opinion, one of the best bed racks you can buy for a number of reasons. So again, I'm going to kind of walk you through that. I'm going to show you why I think that. I'm going to show you exactly how I have mine kitted out. So if you are looking at this for a Nissan Frontier 3rd gen or 2nd gen, they're the same. This should be a helpful video for you and give you a ton of information. Even if you don't have a Nissan Frontier though, still going to learn a lot about the Xtrusion bed rack. If you haven't heard of it, there are a ton of really cool, unique features about this bed rack and what makes it so special. So if you want to learn more about all of that, stay tuned.
You got it, I got it. It began in the land of the sandstorm. I fought it, though I wanted everything to do with what you give to me. Loosening my grip.
All right, guys, so let me start by talking just a little bit about the Xtrusion rack itself in general, kind of my thoughts on it as far as quality. I've had mine on for about 1.5 years now, so I've had it on for quite a long time. So this is kind of a long-term review. After 1.5 years, I've been through Wyoming for 2 weeks. I've been all over the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, Wisconsin, all over Indiana, down to Kentucky, all over the place. And this thing has been great. I mean, you can see like a spot here of some of the powder coats starting to finally chip off. But here's the thing, this whole thing is made of aluminum. So I have no rusting whatsoever. I mean, again, this thing's been on here for 1.5 years. My truck sits out 24/7. I do not put it in the garage. It doesn't fit with the rooftop tent. So it is sitting in the elements 24/7, 365. And again, aside from like this one spot of powder coat sort of failing, maybe because I over tightened these bolts, maybe, I don't know. That's about the only spot that I've got where powder coat's kind of rough. But for the most part, you can see, I mean, everything's holding up well. And again, the overall design of this with the modularity, I've attached like mounts for cameras. So I can throw a GoPro up here. I've used their mounts for my rooftop tent here, and those things have worked great. That tent does not move. It's stayed there, you know, since I mounted it 6 months ago. I've thrown some quick releases up here for my axe, for my shovel, so I can throw stuff on the side of the truck really quickly when I want to. Again, because of the modularity of it, it's super, super easy to use. And because of the aluminum, you got no, I guess here we've got some powder coat coming up a little bit there too. But again, underneath it's aluminum. So I don't have like rust dripping out of here like my old bed rack, which was steel. I had to repaint that thing like once a year. It was a pain in the butt, right? But with this stuff, even with the powder coat coming off, I'm not worried about it. I mean, it doesn't look the best, but I mean, overall for 1.5 years of use and heavy use and shaking this thing back and forth with a 170-pound tent on top of it, it's holding up really, really well. Again, just the general benefits of this thing, I've got this slider inside of here, which is awesome. It allows me to put my diesel heater, and I've got a propane tank in there so that when I get to camp, like I am right now, I can just grab this thing, slide it out, and then when I'm ready for bed, I can pop this diesel heater open, my little suitcase here, run it up into my tent. It's right there. I've got my diesel behind it, and then I've got my propane right there, so I can easily reach in, hook my propane up to it, and then cook on my tailgate here. So without that slider, that wouldn't be possible, but thanks to the Xtrusion rack, because of the way you can customize these things, that works really well. Then on this side, again, just kind of keeping it general for now. I did do a pretty unique setup, so I've got 2 support bars on the other side, but on this side I've got 3. And the reason for that is my plan is to use their access gates here. I'm still waiting to get those from them. But when I get those, there will basically be a molly panel on a gas strut on each one of these 2 sections here, so that my trash bag will be kind of hidden behind it, but then I can mount other gear on the outside, and it'll give me a little bit more in the way of security because you won't be able to get to that stuff as easily. And then I have a gate back here too, so I can mount stuff in this area. So again, overall, it's a really, really nice rack. The quality is really good. The fact that it's aluminum has been great. I've got no rust or anything like that. Hi, pup. Dog wanted to be in the video. So overall, the rack has been fantastic. The ability to mount stuff let me put these strobes up here. I just used the stock mounting stuff and some hardware from Xtrusion to mount that. I've got another camera mount over here. So I mean, again, the rack itself is amazing. Love the quality, love the aluminum, love the flexibility of it. Overall, been really happy with it. One thing that I will say is that it is pretty tricky to put together, and that is one of the main complaints that I see online a lot is, you know, hey, I put this whole thing together and then it wasn't right, or I mixed up these two crossbars or whatever. However, what I will say is there's a Facebook group, and I will put a link in the description down below, and the owners of the company are on that all the time. A lot of their staff is on that, and then other folks are super helpful too, and they will do their best to help you. But you know, their goal is to help you with it. It is a little bit tricky, so that definitely can be a concern, but I will say once you get it and you get it right, like again, once I put this on the truck, I haven't changed it, right? It was a little bit tricky to get together the first time, but now that I have it, I'm not messing with it. It's just staying on the truck. And now that it's on, I love it. So anyways, just wanted to share my general thoughts on this thing with you guys as well. All right, so now for you Frontier guys and gals, if you're waiting for that part, this will be that part. I'm going to show you kind of my exact setup. So again, I went with a 2-bar support system on this side with this crossbar here, which is what the slider attaches to. And I'll show you that here in a little more detail in a second. But then I went with a couple molly panels on this side, and I attach an axe and a shovel on this side. So I've got some gear up there if I need it, but it just gives me multiple ways to attach things. Eventually I may, you know, find a way to put my max tracks up here if that makes more sense. Those could go up here. As I showed earlier in the video, I've got a 1/4 mount on here, and then I've got one on the back pole back there. So if I want to throw a GoPro or something up, so you don't even have to be a YouTuber, but if you just like to go out and explore and record your videos, that's an idea. I just bought these things. I'll put a link to them in the description down below, but I bought these things on Amazon. I think 2 for like 15 or 20 bucks. And I bored them out a little bit. I had to make them a little bit bigger to make these bolts fit, but then you throw a couple channel nuts in there, throw a couple bolts in it, and this thing is rock solid. And then you can throw a GoPro or something up on the side. Then as I kind of showed you, I got the strobe bar back here. This actually flashes white and yellow. So in like the dusty trails of Wyoming, that thing came in pretty handy to, you know, make sure that the people behind me could see where I was. So that's one thing that I've done. My Nature Nest is attached using the proprietary Xtrusion system. It comes with these 4 sort of custom built brackets with a couple channel nuts that go in there, and then this bolt was the one that actually came with my tent. So my tent's bolts actually matched up perfectly with this. I didn't have to modify it at all, and I just attached it via 4 of these things. So there's, you know, 2 back here. One tip that they do give you is to put them on the outside of the rack, so you don't want to put these on the inside because they could move around. So on the back, they're on the back side, and then on the front up here, they're on the front side, and then that kind of sandwiches it in there so that they can't move around. So as you can see, I actually ran, these are nylite, and they're intended to be bed lights. So like lights you would add down in the bed of your truck. But I actually ran them down the rails on the sides of my rooftop tent channels. And then I sort of hung this back one. I probably need to attach that in a better way, but it works perfectly fine the way that it is. I just didn't really want to like drill anything, and I don't trust the 3M to hold it up. So that's kind of just zip tied right there to the back, but you could attach this any way you wanted. I mean, you could go, you know, up here under the rooftop tent and attach it with 3M and heat gun it to try and make it stay as good as possible. But once it starts to go and gets a little dirty, then it just comes off. So I don't like to use the 3M as much as possible. But this thing has lights that go all the way around it, which has worked out pretty well. So now let's pull out the slider here, and I will show you kind of how this works. Now, one thing is, once you get weight on this thing, it does get a little bit harder to pull out. So just again, full transparency, the more weight you've got on it, the more you kind of got to give it a little bit of a tug. But I mean, it still works fine. And what I like about it is it's a mechanical system. So let me show you. So it's basically got these little plastic channel things that go into the existing channel of the slider bar. And then when you slide it, it just slides along those plastic guides, right? But then again, you can see where my diesel heater is now. So the idea being, then I can come over here, I can pop these latches open, grab my stuff out of it, get my hose to run it up in there, get my exhaust, everything's in this box for my diesel heater. And then I also mounted the fuel tank, which normally mounts to the diesel heater itself, but in this case, I used a troller motor quick release, and then I mounted that quick release to the slider. But then I can undo this one screw on the top, slide this thing off, take off the fuel tank, and I can just remove this from the truck. So in the summertime, it's really easy, maybe a 5-minute job to pull this thing off and put it in the garage for the season and be done. But as a result, I had to put the diesel tank somewhere, and as you can see, I just actually used a couple of bolts that went straight into channel nuts and hold the diesel right on there, right behind it, and then your fuel line runs up and underneath and into the unit, and you're good to go. And then sort of lastly, again, specifically for the Nissan folks, as I mentioned in the intro, I am going to give you some tips on how to get your channel bolts set in your stock bed rails in your Frontier. I will say it was very tricky. So I've had several people reach out to me and they're like, man, This is really tricky to do, and I agree. And the Xtrusion guys are aware too. I know that a couple people have contacted them, and I've kind of talked to them about it, and I think they're working on a revised version of this. But so basically, when you get it all ready, you've got this, you know, this bottom piece, which is where the support rails for the bed rack slot in, that goes down over the bed. It obviously is not long enough to reach down to the channels in the Frontier. So they've made these like extension brackets. You basically have to then run these 2 bolts back to nuts right back there behind the bracket. Now, you know, the couple people that have reached out to me are like, hey man, I cannot get these things to seat. What I basically did was, my little tip, and this is up to you, especially if you have a brand new truck like I do and you're reticent to do this. This is just plastic here, and that sticks down 1 millimeter or 2 further, but under that is steel. So the bed actually does go under here. And then there's this plastic that goes over it. So then I put my drills right through here where these bolts were gonna go, and I notched up into this plastic and into the steel 3 or 4 millimeters, like just a little like half moon, right? So I just notched this a tiny bit. And when I did that, that gave me the clearance that I needed to then be able to get the nuts to actually fully seat on the back of those bolts. Now, to give you an idea of what happened in Wyoming with me, and if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a card in the top right corner here. I actually had this whole thing sort of come off. So basically I have 5 supports, so I have 5 channel nuts that hold this thing to the bed. I had like 1 left, the other 4 had come loose. Again, not the fault of the bed rack, totally my fault, because I had not gotten these big channel nuts that you see in here to fully seat. So it is pretty tricky, and especially like on these ones towards the back here, you can see there's this bump, which makes it really sort of hard to get to. It's very, very important though that you get those metal channel nuts in there, and maybe you can see it a little bit more on this one further back in here. It's really important that you get those channel nuts to sit literally straight up and down. They cannot be like just slightly at an angle or anything like that. So you got to be very careful in ensuring that those things are straight up and down when you put them in there. All 5 of them, or 6, or however many you have based on your sort of setup, because those are what hold it to the bed rack, right? So I think mine were kind of tweaked a little bit, like I couldn't quite get them to actually go all the way up. Now, once the bed rack came off, you better believe I got them all the way up one way or another. I used a tip is I used like a screwdriver and a hammer and kind of just tapped it until it sat in there, until it locked in place. So you can do that, but it just takes a little bit of tweaking. Another tip is they do send Loctite with it. I did not use it on mine because when I put it together, I wasn't sure that it was the way that I wanted it to. But now that it's set, I probably ought to go back through and just slowly sort of remove bolts and then reapply, put Loctite on and then reapply them. Although I will say, again, I've had it on for 6 months now. And now that it's all locked in, now that all the channel nuts are locked in, I have no movement. I go through and I check it maybe once every month or 2. But for the last few months, I've had no movement at all. Nothing's been loose. So I think it's pretty much set at this point. So just check it for the first few months. Make sure that nothing's wiggled itself loose. But once you get it tight, especially if you use Loctite, you should be good to go and never have to touch this thing again. All right, guys, so that will do it for my sort of walk around of the Xtrusion bed rack / my long-term thoughts on the system and how it's held up. You know, overall, I've been really pleased with the system, and I really love how flexible it is, and the fact that it's aluminum. I mean, just those 2 things alone. The fact that you can customize it any way that you want, that you can attach stuff pretty much anywhere that you want, and the fact that it's aluminum and I don't have to worry about rust has been phenomenal. So, again, if you have questions about this bed rack, post up in the comments down below. I'm happy to answer them if I can. If you have questions specifically about, say, your bed rack, let's say you bought one from them, definitely join that Facebook group, which I will link in the description down below as well, because they're great there and there's a ton of helpful people that will answer your questions as well. And use the search bar, as always, right, online. Use the search bar first, see if you can find an answer. If you can't, ask your question and someone will help you. Then for my Nissan folks, if you have a Frontier and you have questions about this, if you want to know what my setup is, I'm happy to help with that. I can even connect you with the Xtrusion guys because they are great to work with. If you have questions or want to work with them, just let me know, and I'm happy to send a connection email and introduce you so that you can ask questions or kind of get your setup exactly the way that you want it. Or if you just want mine, you could probably send it to them, and I'm sure they've got it on file, and they could probably just cut it all up and then send it out to you. So again, I hope that was helpful. If it was, click that like button. If you're not already, make sure to click the subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when new videos drop. I do a couple videos every week, usually like gear reviews type thing, some overlanding stuff, general overlanding stuff, camping stuff, and then Nissan content too. So again, if you are here because you're a Nissan person, there's tons of stuff on this 3rd gen coming out. I've put out a good amount of stuff already on it. I've got stuff on 2nd gen Frontiers and 2nd gen Xteras. Had one of those for several years and it was great. And they're all great trucks too. So if you're looking for a rig, I highly recommend like used Nissans. They're a great budget buy compared to like a lot of Toyotas and that sort of thing. So as I mentioned earlier, links to all this stuff will be in the description down below, so check those out if you want to purchase any of this stuff, like the strobe bar or the, like I said, the extrusion rack itself. Happy to connect you with those guys if you send me a DM or send me an email. If you send me an email at allthingsoverlanding@gmail.com and say, hey, can you connect me with the Xtrusion guys? They have some questions. I'm happy to do that as well. Also in the description down below will be links to all my other social channels. So if you want to, join the conversation on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or wherever, check out those links. And then there are also links to my website where I've got funny overlanding camping stickers and patches. So if you're into that kind of stuff, check those out down below. Pretty cool stuff in my opinion, not biased at all. And then last but not least, there are links to my Patreon page. We've got a 24/7 Discord. We chat all the time about our rigs and our cars. And that's a lot of fun, so check that out. And then there's also the Newbie Overlanders Facebook group. Totally free to join, tons of awesome members in there. And it's different from the big groups because nobody bullies anybody. We're all there to help. And if you're newer to overlanding and you want to kind of get into it, we'd love to have you there as well. But again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.